Hello, and welcome to the Things I Want My Daughters to Know podcast, the podcast redefining women's health, one unfiltered conversation at a time. I'm your host, Jacqueline Rose, and every week I'll sit down with leading women's health experts and real women to share their lived experiences, bust health myths, challenge outdated and uninformed narratives, and explore what's really possible for women. We'll talk about periods, fertility, menopause, hormones, aging, and everything in between. This podcast is for every woman who ever felt confused, dismissed, or left out of the conversation about her own health. It is a space to celebrate women, break the silence, and open up conversations between mothers, daughters, sisters, and friends. Please hit the follow or subscribe button so you don't miss an episode and share this podcast with your daughters, family, and friends. Let's get on with the episode. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the Things I Want My Daughters to Know podcast. I am so excited for today's guest. Pat Duckworth has been in the menopause space for a long time. We've known each other for a number of years, and I'm so honored that she has agreed to come and chat with me on the podcast. I know we're going to have so much to talk about. So really, this is a conversation that is not to be missed because we're going to take a deep dive into the menopause space, what is happening, how things have changed, where she sees things going. So Pat, welcome. I'm so happy to have you here. Tell us who you are, a little bit about what you do, and we'll get straight into the conversation.
Oh, that's a difficult question. Right, so I'm Pat Duckworth. I'm a women's health strategist. I'm kind of guiding women through what they're experiencing. I see women one-to-one as a therapist, and I also run training for organizations because, there's a lot of workplaces now that want more information about menopause. Employers who are really engaged with making a better workspace for their employees. And I also help other therapists to understand more about menopause because they're getting more women asking them.
Yeah.
And I want them to be upskilled with it and to learn the things that over 15 years I've learned in how to deal with it.
Yeah. So one of the reasons why I'm so excited for you to be here is because you have been in the menopause space for a very long time,
Mm.
almost 15 years, and you join a number of my guests on this podcast who really have been in the menopause space for a long time, who have seen the progressions, moving from, 2002 when HRT was, blackballed to now where
Yeah.
HRT is gold standard to who knows where things are going to go in another 10 years. So maybe let's start with what you have seen happen over the course of your time in the field. The good, the bad, the ugly. What have you seen sort of change? Maybe let's start off with the positives and then we'll sort of move a little bit into some of the pitfalls or challenges that we can see happening.
Yeah, so 15 years ago, I mean, it's not that long, but hardly anybody was talking about menopause. And in fact, I'd just become a therapist. I'd retired from another career. I've had several careers, and I'd retired from my civil service career. I'd retrained as a therapist, and I was looking around thinking, how can I help my clients more? And I was seeing clients coming in with particularly women at midlife with anxiety, poor sleep, weight gain, and you go, this could be your menopause.
Yeah.
But nobody was saying that word.
Yeah.
In fact, it was a word that you didn't really say. So I think that's the first thing. We talk way more openly now and use the menopause word, and people are getting more used to talking about perimenopause. It's not
Yeah.
so weird as it used to be. Um, they used to talk about the change. You kind of whispered it, and you're like,
Yes.
what's the change? But that's how people talked about it.
Yeah.
And there was nothing really in the media. I used to go along to networking meetings, and I'd just published in 2000 and whatever, Hot Women Call Solutions. And I used to stand up at a networking meeting, when you do your minute or your 10 minutes or
Yes.
whatever. I say, I'm Pat Duckworth, I'm the hot woman with Call Solutions. And you could see tumbleweed go across the room. They're like, what's she talking about?
Yeah.
And then I talk about menopause, and people would come up to me afterwards and say, "Is that a business? Who wants to?
Yeah.
I don't get it. What do you do?" And I said, "Well, like half the population go through menopause, and often they don't understand what they're going through, what they could do about it." And they're like, "Oh, uh-huh." And then we had several programs about it. So it started with Mariella Frostrup doing a documentary where actually she talked a lot about cognitive behavioral therapy,
Yeah.
which a lot of people at that time didn't know that much about, certainly didn't know how you could use it in menopause. We had Kirsty Walk coming and sharing her experiences. And of course, when these celebrities and presenters start talking about it, the conversation opens up. And gradually there was more conversation. We had the Equality Act come in and people starting to think, well, was there discrimination in the workplace against women because of menopause? And you're starting to see the first cases going to employment tribunal, which kind of wakes people up a bit that, oh, it's not a disability, but under the Act it could be a disability.
That whole thing is so fascinating because it's a real double-edged sword
Yes.
calling menopause a disability and having it recognized in the Equity Act. It means that it's recognized, but calling it a disability feels very
I
inappropriate.
know. Yeah, it feels kind of. Whoa. I don't know if you've seen the latest trend, and we will get on to talk about the latest trends, but um, I think this is a TikTok thing or an Instagram thing where it's now being referred to as cougar puberty. I don't know how I feel about that.
Gosh.
But if it lightens up the conversation, then I'm in
Yeah,
there.
that sounds like a TikTok type of phrase to make it sound very cool, but doesn't really say very much.
Although, it is the other end of puberty.
Yeah.
So I don't know where I feel about that. But anyway, it's not down to me. It's how other people feel, whether it helps them or not. And then, of course, we had the documentary with Davina McCall. And that, I think, because that started to edge into a younger generation, people were like relating to Davina and like, oh, she's talking about it. And that stirred up so much. Like 2021, we're coming out from COVID and people have been watching stuff. And it's suddenly like, oh, this is a thing. And of course, it led to a lot more conversation, and it also led to a lot more demand on GPs,
Yeah.
to general practitioners, medical practitioners, to prescribe hormone therapy. And then, we're just at the end of COVID and there's supplies of estrogen, and,
Yeah.
that led to a whole different conversation. And then we've got, a lot more celebrities stepping forward, some of them because they think it's worthwhile to share their story, others because they have product.
Yeah.
And the difficult thing about that is people talking about all the negative parts of menopause because, fear markets product.
Yeah.
So if you can say something's really bad, but this is how you get out of it,
Yeah.
you're going to get more people listening to it. So lots of new products being launched, whether they were medical products or lifestyle products. So I think that conversation's more open now, and we're seeing more representation in the media of women at midlife. I don't know if you've seen, there's a new TV series starring Keely Hawes called The Assassin,
No.
and it's being marketed as the first menopausal hit person,
Oh my gosh. Okay.
which is which is so funny. I mean, she is of that age, and it's important for her character that she's of that age because she has a son,
Right.
and she's trying to explain to him who she really is because he didn't realize that she'd been. Yeah. But you actually see her taking some form of medication, and she's saying, "Oh, get over it. It's just the age I am." And that's really like the only direct reference. But
Yeah.
I think what we need now is a female James Bond who has hot flushes and brain fog and forgets Q's name or something.
So it's really interesting you say that because obviously we're talking about the UK experience. There's
Yes.
also a similar thing going on in the US. I think the US is a few years behind where the
Yes,
UK is, but
yes.
there's a brand new comedy sitcom with the stand-up comedian Leanne Morgan. And she is very outwardly spoken about her menopause experience. And there have been a number of just sort of been binge watching her comedy sitcom, and there are a number of references to her menopause experience.
Yeah,
But this
there
is in the
was,
comedy realm, and she is a stand-up comedian, and she talks very openly in her stand-up comedy about it. But this is a show on Netflix where menopause is part and parcel of the character.
yeah, and there was a very funny comedy series here. In fact, they've done two series. The woman's name's gone out of my head, Bridget. Anyway, it's called The Change. Honestly, it was so funny. I watched the first episode and I thought, well, I'll show my husband, see if he goes, oh, not really. And he thought it was so funny that the
Yeah.
two of us sat and watched the whole thing. And then when the second series came out, we watched all of that. So, we're seeing more representations. We're seeing ourselves on the screen, not just as victims or people who've got a fear of this, but as people living their lives and
Yeah.
having a laugh. And so I think that's changed a lot. We're seeing the number of people taking hormone therapy increasing. I mean, it's gone up from around the 11% mark up to the 14, 15% mark.
That's still
Um,
quite low.
Still, yes, relatively low.
Yeah.
And of course, we've seen new non-hormonal medications come out and new non-hormonal treatments and people engaging in lifestyle. And I don't know if you've seen, but this year's World Menopause Day is about lifestyle. So,
Yeah.
yeah, really interesting. So a lot going on. We could actually talk the rest of the day about that, but those are the highlights.
And in terms of maybe what had in that amazing, and it really is amazing, a progression, what could we point to and say maybe we haven't done as well, maybe hasn't happened as well as we would have liked to, or the obstacles or the challenges that have occurred in this sort of as the conversation has become more accepted and grown.
Um, well, I used to say, if only people would talk about it more. And now I'm at the, oh, please, can we stop talking about
I
it
want
stage?
to tell you, it's so funny that you say that because one of your colleagues, Rachel Lancaster, who has also been a guest on this podcast, and I don't know if she's going to be before you or after you. I haven't yet scheduled all the interviews, but listeners, if you are listening, go check out the Rachel Lancaster episode. Also, she said exactly the same thing,
Mm.
which is really interesting. Of before, I used to be desperate for menopause to be talked about, and now I just want them to stop talking about it.
Because it's become so confusing for women.
Yes.
I think even if they didn't know much about it previously, they knew there was hormone therapy. Perhaps they had half an idea of what that was and whether they
Yeah.
wanted to take it or not. And they knew that there might be some other things they could do. And now they're kind of, well, there's different types of hormone therapy, and there are the people who say you really should take it for your symptoms, and then other people saying everybody should take it because it's a preventative,
Yeah.
and different sorts of research being quoted, and then the people who say don't touch it, and then the people like me who say it's up to you, it's a choice.
Yeah.
And I think at this stage of life, it's a very busy stage of life. I don't know if I would say it was the busiest. I think it might be because if you're in a relationship and you have children, perhaps the children are getting to the leaving home empty nest stage. You have reached a certain stage at work and perhaps there's more demands. Mum and dad are getting older and perhaps need more attention. And then there's your relationship with your partner. And in
Yeah.
the middle of it all, your body's doing somersaults and your brain is actually changing its structure.
Yeah.
So, it is like going through puberty. It is like being a teenager, but with all the responsibilities of an adult.
Yeah.
And so many women just say, just tell me what to do.
Yeah.
Just give me the tablet. And you go, it's not that simple.
Yeah.
And it's
And that
about
is
you.
maybe one of the problems about the UK menopause conversation
Mm,
is that at the moment, HRT is being touted as gold standard treatment
yeah.
for menopausal symptoms and long-term women's health protective, bones, brain, and heart. And when that is the narrative that is being shared, it's very difficult to counter argue against it. It's very difficult. And again, there has been some amazing research into the impact of estrogen on the brain and how during perimenopause, menopause, brain function changes, and all of that is relevant and valid. But then the next step of menopause, the brain needs estrogen to function. Menopause is an estrogen deficient state. Therefore, as we age, you're going to need to have your estrogen to support your brain. It makes so much sense. It's very difficult for just, a regular woman who's following the conversation to know why that wouldn't be, the natural way that the argument would be played out.
And of course, if you've got doctors, medical professionals
Yeah,
who are saying these things, you haven't got the time or the energy to go back to the research that they're quoting
yeah,
to say, does that research apply to everybody?
yeah,
And no, it doesn't.
yeah,
And it depends when your menopause is and what symptoms. I've had women saying to me who like are in their 30s, when do I start taking HRT? And I say, have you got symptoms? And I
yeah,
go, no. Why do you want to take it then? Oh, I thought at some stage you just started
yeah,
taking it.
yeah,
That assumption that you have to take it. I thought it would protect me. And, it's not just HRT, you see it with other medications as well, where somebody starts to say, oh, this particular medication, there's some implication that it might help to protect you from Alzheimer's. And you go, what? Because as you get older, you start to worry about these
yeah,
things. Or if you take this, it may protect you from like osteoporosis, not necessarily HRT, other medications.
yeah,
There's not much research to back up the claim, but you've only got to whisper it a few times and people go, have you heard? This might protect you against this or protect you against that. And it kind of gains credibility
yeah,
when in fact the research and the numbers, the statistics don't back it
yeah,
up, but you're dealing with life and you don't have time to go and have a
yeah,
look at it.
yeah, yeah. And if someone has sat on the Good Morning TV couch and has said something, why would you not believe it? I do want to mention two things. I want to talk about the research because I think it's really important to bring that up about, what is the research, the women's health research, and what's going on with all of that. So I definitely want to mention that. I'm going to just put a pin in that for 1 second because I want to refer to another one of your colleagues who just recently wrote a LinkedIn post, Vikram Tanalinka. Is that I can never remember how you pronounce his surname. But I know that you know Vikram.
Yeah.
And he just wrote recently about the problem with the increased um, um, prescriptions of HRT, that so many more doctors are giving out HRT, but don't actually know how to prescribe it properly or how to direct the patient how to use it properly. And about the problem with pharmacists who, when they look at the prescription, he was talking specifically about one brand of estrogen and estrogen progesterone combined, the Everol product. I'm not here to promote any type of product at all. It was just in his post where he talks about patients may ask for it, doctors may prescribe it, but are they prescribing the right type? Are they
Mm.
prescribing estrogen and or progesterone where necessary? Is the pharmacist looking at the prescription that has been written out, giving the right version of the product?
Yeah.
Because there are three different versions of this product. And the patient doesn't know the difference. The patient is just giving the prescription to the pharmacist. The pharmacist, he talks about a number of situations where the pharmacist has not given the correct version of this product. And also that the patient has to have compliance in using it
Mm.
and use it appropriately. When it comes to the patch, sometimes they think that, the patch, if you cut it in half or half a dose, it's not going to work properly or it's going to a whole bunch of things. So just saying that HRT is now being used or being prescribed more by doctors is actually just the beginning of the
Yeah.
story, because there are a whole bunch of steps along that process, but between the doctor prescribing it and the patient using it and seeing an effective result in the use of the HRT for the symptoms that they're experiencing, which
Yeah.
also may or may not happen.
Yes.
There is a whole wealth of things and steps along that journey
Yeah.
that make it a more complicated, nuanced conversation.
Yeah. And women sharing HRT. Oh, well, you have some of my patches then. Oh, I couldn't get this. Have a go with mine. The number of scenarios
Yeah,
is exactly what you're saying. The research that went into the drug in the first place that happened in like test conditions, when it gets to the market, you're out of control. Anything can happen.
yeah,
And, you know, GPs aren't that well trained in it. I mean, it is getting better. We're starting to train our GPs better. But if you talk to somebody who's an endocrinologist like Anise Mukherjee, who really understands this, who understands like testing for hormones and when that's appropriate, when it isn't appropriate, and what happens if you take this and what happens if you take that. Somebody of her knowledge and experience can see all these things, but GP's like, okay. And sometimes, that relationship between the patient and the GP, who's only got 10 minutes to talk to you
yeah,
about it, and is saying, and the person is saying, well, I want this one. They don't know anything about it, but their friend took it, or they've seen it, or they've seen something on social media about it. And sometimes the doctor will resist it and say, I don't think that's suitable. But sometimes, like, okay, there you go. And
yeah,
then, as you say, then they get to the pharmacist who may or may not give them the right one, and then they start playing with the dosage.
yeah. And I'm even thinking of like the most simple things of, let's say, it's the summer now in the Northern Hemisphere. You're hot, you're sweaty, your patch may fall off. Therefore, if you're going on a holiday, you're swimming more, your patch, so you reapply. So maybe you're putting on too many patches over the course of a week just because of the nature of this time of year, which means you're getting maybe too much of one of the hot. It's just not so easy. Again,
No,
we're not saying it's bad. We're not saying you
no,
shouldn't do it.
no.
We just want to bring up the issues that are involved that are not talked about.
Yeah, I mean, you could go on holiday and get diarrhea and sickness. Always affects medication.
Yeah, yeah,
Or, you're not storing it at the right temperature.
yeah,
And
yeah,
anything can happen. So I think it's trying to get over how complicated it is. And I know that's not a very welcome message. I know it would be so simple if we just go, take this, you're fine, see you in a year's time. It's not like that. Our bodies are so complex
yeah,
and so different from the next person's body.
yeah. So, talk to me a little bit. Again, I don't want to go too much into it because we've got so much to talk about, but
I,
just talk to me about the research piece of it. The fact that there is claim now, sort of where were we, maybe a few years ago with the research? Where are we today?
I think we're still in a really complicated place because women's bodies are so complex, which is why most medical research in the past has been done on men,
Yeah,
or even to the earliest stage, male rats,
yeah,
because they don't have cycles and they're much more straightforward. So you can test things on them, get
yeah,
a result, and then say, well, women are a bit smaller, so they can take a bit less of it.
yeah,
So research into women's health and women's health issues is so far behind what it is generally. And what we're seeing is some research that are really small sample sizes and perhaps have looked at something specific. So they've looked at women with early menopause, And they've said, what works for women at early menopause? Well, if you're in early menopause or really premature menopause, so you've gone into menopause before age 40, you have a whole different set of medical issues because you're still at what would be a reproductive age. Your system still needs support. Your heart needs more support. Your bones need more support. And so, if you go into menopause early, you are going to be recommended, even if you've got fairly strong bones and there's nothing wrong with your heart, you will be recommended to take hormone therapy. And then, like the 40 to 45 age group, well, yeah, possibly as well. But then we start to see that the statistics around the preventative side, which happens in early menopause, those statistics get extrapolated
Yeah.
into women at all ages.
Yeah.
And that it doesn't work like
Yeah.
that because as your body is getting older and it's changing, it doesn't need the same amounts of the same chemicals.
Yeah.
So saying, oh, it's a preventative if you're younger, but the research isn't there to say it's a
Yeah.
preventative as you get older.
And I
You
know that
know,
also a lot of the research on effects of menopause have been done with women after hysterectomies. So women who have gone into immediate surgical or
yes,
medical menopause, which is also different to women who go through a more natural 10-year process.
yes,
Um, and that's also something that is not talked about. That, who are, the research that is limited that but does exist, who are your samples that you're doing it on?
yes,
And as you said, that gets extrapolated, but no one talks about that. And I think research that is desperately missing is the long-term impacts of pill use, the oral
yeah,
contraceptive pill. Because no one talk, I mean, I talk about it a lot on this podcast, but no one is talking about the fact that women are taking the oral contraceptive pill for 25, 30 years, pumping their bodies full of synthetic hormones, but no one ever says that. This is, the thing that every woman is doing and what maybe that is doing.
yeah,
If I'm not saying there are, but are there
yeah.
any implications to a woman taking long term the oral contraceptive pill, pumping her body's full of synthetic hormones on her long term health and longevity? That's not
And
never brought up.
And that same woman then going to the doctor and saying, okay, I'm now 49, 50. How do I know whether I'm going through menopause? And should I carry on taking the pill or do I transition into HRT now? So I'm going from one form of hormones into another form of
Yeah.
hormones. Oh my goodness, it just gets so complicated. And the problem is, that it only takes someone, we talked a bit about the sort of whispers before, but it takes someone who says, oh, 35% of women have been shown to have good results from taking this in terms of preventing Alzheimer's disease. And people go, 35%, that's pretty good. Uh, it's where did that number come from? But it will then get repeated and
Yes.
repeated and repeated.
Yeah.
And this is, having talked to Rachel Lancaster, you know that she kind of fights against this,
Yeah.
this like the statistic around how many women have left work because of menopause.
Yeah.
That statistic has been quoted in so many places. It was extrapolated from a small sample. It gets quoted in Parliament. Everybody just believes it.
Yeah. Yeah.
So this is the problem with research is all the time looking at the sample, who those women were. I mean, when you think how discredited the World Health Initiative report was, because
Yeah.
they went, well, hang on a minute, those were older women. There were a lot of them were overweight. They were smokers. They were this, they were that. And so those statistics got discredited and they said, so you can't really say that, there's that much of an increased risk. Well, you have to do that with all research and say, who is this group?
Yeah. Yeah.
Have they had a hysterectomy? What age were they when they had the hysterectomy? Are they people in premature menopause? Are they people with diabetes? So many questions to ask.
Yeah.
I get it, it's complicated.
Yeah. And that's fine. And again, we're not saying don't take HRT. We're not saying that, throw the baby out with the bathwater. We're just saying make sure, and it's putting the burden on the woman
Yeah,
to do some research. And obviously, as you said, women are very busy, and we're going to listen to those trusted people that are on the television that are sharing, information that seems to make sense. So,
Yeah. And it was really interesting that when like Davina McCall found out that she'd actually got a brain
brain
tumor.
tumor. Yes, that was recently.
And funnily enough, when I was looking back today at when I wanted to see exactly what date her first documentary came out, and the piece that goes with that said, and Davina said her brain fog was so bad, she thought she'd got a brain tumor or something, or was suffering with
Um,
Alzheimer's. And then when they discovered she did have one, she said, "Oh, I now realize that a lot of my symptoms were down to that. And if I'd known that at the time, so when you deal with a sample of one person
yeah,
who's having good effects with something, you go, okay, but is that going to work for me? And what are the
yeah,
circumstances in which that occurs?
yeah.
So,
Fascinating. Yeah.
yes.
So, what are the trends that you are seeing happening? What are the trends that you think are positive trends? Because obviously, we don't just want the doom and gloom. There is so much that is happening that is good in the women's health menopause space. So, what are the trends that you are noticing, and what do you see happening, sort of in a good way for women?
So, way more women at midlife are now being diagnosed with neurodifferences.
Yeah,
ADHD, autism. And I think there's like a perfect storm with that, that some women, their children have reached an age, perhaps teenage, where that there's something that they're not happy with. They're taking them to be diagnosed and then realizing that's me too.
yeah,
And then they're getting diagnosed themselves.
yeah,
There's more awareness around neurodiversity now. It's more acceptable to talk about it.
yeah,
Women have definitely been undiagnosed in the past and underdiagnosed. It was thought to be mainly a male thing. And I
yeah,
think that's because women have been really good at masking it.
yeah,
They've used a lot of their social skills to mask it. And then they get to menopause, and the chemistry and structure of the brain are changing, and things get worse. What they're experiencing, their experience of menopause gets worse. And what I'm seeing is much more interest in that. I think it's good that more women are able to talk about it, to get a diagnosis if they find that helpful, to get medication if they find that helpful, or to find ways of dealing with it.
yeah,
Um, that there's more research going on in that area now,
yeah,
looking at neurodiversity at different stages of women's lives. I think that's very positive. And looking at how to make adjustments in the workplace to support women who are not only, the intersectionality between menopause and neurodiversity. I sometimes have conversations with a company called Neurobox, and they're specifically looking to help employers to make adjustments for people who have neurodifferences. And then then I talk to them and say, yeah, and you've got women at menopause who are having a different experience. And some of the adjustments that employers can make kind of sit hand in glove with that. Perhaps there
mm,
needs to be a quiet room that the person can go to. Perhaps they just need to go and have a lie down for a little
mm,
while. Perhaps they need more breaks, or to come in earlier or come in later, or there's a lot of crossover between that. So I think
interesting,
that's a very positive thing to be looking at.
interesting.
Um, Women are always, I run a menopause cafe. I think that's a positive thing that has
Yeah.
come up. 2017 was the first menopause cafe that was founded up in Scotland. And now menopause cafes are not only around the UK, but around the world.
Yes, yes,
And the good thing about menopause cafes is there's no agenda.
yeah,
The agenda is whatever the people want to talk about. And I say people because everybody's welcome,
yeah.
men are welcome. We had our male MP, Member of Parliament, come to my last menopause cafe. I'm going to say bless him, which seems a bit. but he's only 31.
Oh,
He'd not had a good day. It had been very hot. Like he could hardly get back from London because the signals had gone down. Then he walks into a room of hot women.
menopausal women.
But he's at the end of it, I said, "Oh, what have you learned from being here
Yeah,
today?" And he said, "It's been really interesting. I've just learned so much that I think helps me with my constituents as well as with my mum."
yeah, yeah,
But the fact that there are now organizations where you can just go and talk, where nobody's trying to sell you something,
yeah,
and you can talk to other women in community and they can say, well, this is what I've tried, or oh yeah, I had that.
yeah,
So I think Menopause Cafe is very positive in doing that. One of the things that comes up in menopause cafes, I mean, women do talk to each other about like lifestyle things, what
yeah,
exercise they're doing. They talk about what supplements they're taking, how they've changed their diets. And they talk a lot about not liking their weight. I try and sort of get this thing over that when you're going through puberty and the weight goes onto your breasts and on your bum and your hips, and you think you're super sexy. And of course, it's just your body storing lipids where it needs to
yeah,
in order to support pregnancy and breastfeeding. But we just think it's a sexy body, but that is just your body doing that. And then you get to menopause and you're and your body goes, okay, what you need to do now is store a bit of weight around your waist and your
right.
tummy, because that's where we can store some estrogen. And we go, what's
Yeah,
this?
yeah, yeah. I
um,
think it's so fascinating that women don't understand why their body is fat storing, and that the fact that there is an biological estrogen reason for fat storage, and it's sort of like, the if the skin I look at. I mean, maybe this is just me trying to justify my own body shape, but I do look at some of those, skinny midlife women, and I'm thinking, you're going to have a major estrogen problem in a few years' time, because where's your estrogen going to be? You're going to be all the way down, at zero with the estrogen. But, us with a little bit more, fat on us, we're going to be blessed with having, maybe that's going to mean that we can actually navigate perimenopause and menopause much easier, because our body is producing its own estrogen through the fat cells. And yeah, like maybe women with a little extra fat are actually in a better health position than those women who are really super skinny.
yeah, and it's just so sad that we hate on our bodies at this stage of life instead of going, this body has seen me through 50 years. It's
Yeah,
done all those menstrual cycles. Perhaps, it's gone through pregnancies. It's been through illnesses. It's done all this stuff. And yet I
yeah,
still look at it and go, you're not the right shape. And so what concerns me at the moment is the weight loss injections,
yes,
because a lot of women, I've heard them, I've had doctors come and talk after my menopause cafes because we don't do education during them, but I can run a session afterwards. And the question has been, well, will HRT help me lose weight? No, it won't. No, that's not what it's for, and that's not
yeah,
what it does. And I go, oh, because I thought that was going to be the answer. So now we're seeing like a double up of medication where the big pharmacy companies are saying, what you need is to take the hormone therapy and take the weight loss injections.
yeah. And then they
And
can work together, and then you're going to feel amazing.
you're
Yeah,
going to look good and you're going to be
yeah,
slim and you're going to
yeah,
use that. And you're like, oh no, because
yeah,
now the pressure is on again.
yeah,
And in fact, even in my weekend newspaper, I saw somebody say, a woman saying, well, last year was brat summer, and this year is like skinny summer because people around her, the women, are losing weight. There's a kind of a bit of a taboo about saying you're using weight loss injections, but, somebody's
yeah,
losing weight pretty quickly, you know what's going on.
yeah,
Um, and this pressure again to lose weight instead of saying, what does my body need? What does it need at this stage?
yeah,
Does it need that bit of fat? What nourishment does it need? Is what's happening like interacting with the hormone therapy in a bad way,
Yeah.
as well as, in terms of my lifestyle, how is it interacting with my food? Am I getting the nourishment I need? So I'm sorry, I've gone back to sort of negatives again, but I'm
No, I
really,
think it's important because there are so many podcast episodes now. I follow a lot of different people in the health space, and the topic is this HRT, GLP-1 interactions that you can take them together and just like it's, as you said, like it's a double whammy in a positive way. It's being marketed and sort of packaged as yes, the GLP-1s are not going to interfere with your HRT and you can take them together and it's all great and wonderful. And there are so many podcast episodes that I've seen and listened to where they are, as you said, packaging these two products together.
yeah. And the British Menopause Society did issue a fact sheet about this, saying, well, we don't know what effect it's having on progesterone uptake. And this can be an
Mm,
issue for contraception, but it could also be
mm,
an issue for HRT. They were just
interesting.
like putting a flag out there, like we
Yeah,
don't know. We're seeing something, but we're not sure what it is that we're
yeah,
seeing. But it could be that it's inhibiting progesterone uptake.
interesting.
So, what does that mean? What does it mean for the longer term? What does it mean for the long term? If somebody, once you start on these GLP-1s, you're not coming off of them.
Yeah.
So what does it mean
I know you
long
can't just
term?
take it for 6 months to lose the 10 pounds and get your beach body and then
No, and we're seeing like reports of celebrities microdosing
yeah,
to get their body to a certain stage for whatever, a part or, and I get it. If you're going to be on TV, if you're going to be a celebrity, you're expected to look a certain way.
yeah,
But you also probably have a dietitian and you have a personal trainer and you have people who are kind of monitoring what's going on. If you're me or you,
yeah,
you're trying to make your own decisions about it.
yeah,
So, and they live different lives to the lives that we lead. You can't just say, oh, well, I have a go at that.
yeah.
Microdosing doesn't sound bad. What?
Yeah, there is a whole big industry around microdosing. But I
Mm,
just want to put a disclaimer on this conversation because if anyone is listening that is taking GLP-1s for very legitimate health reasons, that's not what we're talking about.
no,
We're not talking about people who have serious health issues where losing weight is a significant improvement in their health and well-being. GLP-1s were created for very specific reasons. They were not created to lose your 10 pounds or to be Hollywood thin. They were created for very specific health reasons. And just to put a disclaimer on the conversation, that's not what we're talking about here.
yeah,
But the conversation about the interaction between GLP-1s and HRT is important, even if you're taking it for very real, significant medical
yeah,
health reasons. And I think just the important thing to know is that even though GLP-1s have been around for years and years, used as a medication for diabetes and a whole bunch of things, they haven't been around or there hasn't been research in the way they're being used today.
yeah,
And I think that's just the caveat that we want to add here is
yeah.
that it's not, people can say, well, GLP-1s have been around for 30 years and they're proven medication and there's no problem with them. And, they've been used and everything. Yes, they have been used, but they've been used for very specific reasons in specific medical cases. They have not been used by
Not
everyone.
as widely,
Yeah,
and not with people just buying them off of the internet.
yeah, yeah,
This is the concern. And I think, we're talking about menopause and we're really, I know I keep saying it's complicated, but your body is complicated and it's even more complicated at this stage of life.
yeah,
So whatever you're taking, whether it's a supplement or you're eating a certain diet or you're taking HRT or you're on GLP-1, everything's interacting with everything else. And your body is specific to you, your gut biome is specific to you. So we don't know how it's all interacting and what the outcome will be. And I think we're just putting that flag out that the BMS put out that said, we don't know.
yeah,
We don't know. And we would say to you, if you're taking HRT, talk to your doctor, talk to your GP, talk to your specialist about it.
Okay, so I guess from there, I want to ask you about, so what should women be doing? And I also want to ask you about menopause in the workplace because you did reference it beforehand. So I do want to get to menopause in the workplace, but I think I do just want to ask you first off. Okay, so whether you are taking HRT or not taking HRT, how do you support women and what is your guidance and advice for what women should be doing? Because they're hearing a lot about, what maybe they should be cautious about or have red flags about. So women may be listening and saying, okay, great. You're making me ask questions about all these things. What what is available to me then? So where do you hold in things that women should be doing that even though menopause is nuanced and complicated, complex and personalized, what are some of the basic things we should be thinking about?
I think it's making your own decisions. It's like becoming educated enough. I want to go, actually, I want to go back a stage and say, I want you to embrace this stage of life.
Yeah.
Instead of like, oh, I don't want to talk about it, I don't want to know, like embrace it because you're going to go through it anyway. So embrace it and say, what could I do that is really going to support my body? And if I'm going to live another 30, 40, 50 years, how do I want those years to be?
Yes.
How can I be my best going into them?
Yeah.
And if you think, well, whether there's some history in your family, you know the medical history of your family. You've lived in that body for 40 or 50 years. You know that body better than anybody. Now, I decided not to take hormone therapy because I'd gone on the pill when I was younger. And honestly, I really didn't like it and I didn't feel very well with it.
Yeah.
Plus, there were certain medical things in my family that I thought, I think that I'm at higher risk with some of this. And so my approach was, well, let me find out what else I can do. And I started doing that much earlier than most women. I think I'm a bit of an outlier because I think I went to my first menopause event when I was in my mid-30s to like,
Wow.
okay, what's available? I need to know. Because my mother had had a hysterectomy, so she could tell me nothing about what would have happened naturally.
No, but that's
So,
great though, because it meant that you were being proactive and taking control and getting really in touch with your body to prepare for what was going to happen next.
and that's what I want. And, please understand that, I had a growing up son, I had a mum who was, not always in the best of health. I was commuting to London for 2 hours every day. I was doing quite a high demand job. I was not receiving support in the workplace. I can tell you that, which is why I probably feel so passionate about it now.
Yeah.
But I had decided that I wanted to be the best I could be. I wanted to eat the right things. And so you have to find the sources of income the sources of knowledge that you trust.
Yeah.
Now, for me, I will go and look at those international menopause societies. Now, not everybody agrees with them, but I feel better knowing that on their panels, there are specialists and doctors and people who look at the research and are monitoring the field and are then saying, well, this is what I think. If you don't agree with them, it's fine, but embrace the idea that you can take action, whether it is to take medication, whether it is actually, I feel okay. So, what I really want to do is look at my diet. What's the best diet for me at this stage of life? Or that I rather use the word nutrition because diet has so many connotations. Do I need to change how I'm exercising because my body isn't the same as it was and I'm starting to notice some things? So could I change how I exercise? How am I dealing with all this stress?
Yeah.
Because that's affecting my body. How am I sleeping at nights?
Yeah.
If you're not sleeping well, it's very hard to be healthy. Are there supplements? Because even if I'm eating a healthy, balanced diet, I might be getting cramp at night, and then I realize I need to take magnesium because or my skin is looking dry, even though I'm eating the right things. So, is there a different supplement that I need to take for that? So I think really have a bit of a project, have Project You, and
I love that.
radical self-care. You know, this isn't just the odd trip to the spa
Yes.
and having a facial. This is how can I really take care of my body?
Yeah.
What can I do for it? And there are so many options, so much you can do. How have you done projects like this in the past? Either you've probably done stuff like this for your kids about
Kids.
what school they should go to or what they should
Yes.
be eating or exercising. Do it for you now.
Yes.
This is important.
Yeah.
Have I finished my rant?
Yeah, well, I love that phrase radical self-care. I've heard you use it before, and I think it's very profound. And I agree with you that the whole concept of um, looking after ourselves, listening to our bodies, connecting to ourselves, paying attention, we don't do. There is always so much stuff happening around that we are not doing that because there's too much noise. We're too distracted. And I think that when we do start to pay attention and when we do start to listen, we find and notice things that are actually very easy and very simple. We start to connect the dots. Like, for example, if you're drinking a glass of wine and then you have some hot flashes later on, or maybe even like within 5 minutes, it's not just that you're having a hot flash. When we start to pay attention, we connect the dots, we start to see things that actually we can do. It's not rocket science. And that's again not to say HRT yes or no, it's just to say pay attention. And this concept of radical self-care, I think, is just so fascinating, and so few of us are doing it.
Absolutely. And we owe it to ourselves and our family.
Yeah,
You know, if you've got a partner, if you've got children, you owe it to them as well as yourself to be looking after yourself
yeah,
because the best thing you can do for other people is to take care of yourself
yeah,
because then nobody has to do it for you.
yeah,
So think about that. How can you really practice that radical self-care so that going forward, you're in the best shape?
yeah. Okay, let's jump to menopause in the workplace, because it is another major big topic. I mean, if I based anything on my LinkedIn newsfeed, I would think that every organization and business and corporation company in the UK has some menopause in the workplace training program. It seems that that really is where sort of there is a lot of work happening. Again, as with everything in the menopause conversation, there are pros and cons to this. There is amazing developments with some things we have to be pay attention to. So, what are you seeing? What are you seeing that is happening in this area? Because it really has exploded in the last couple of years,
Yeah,
and it's
absolutely.
an area that literally did not exist beforehand.
No, not at all. And then suddenly, I think organizations and employers who embraced mental health awareness and then put mental health first aiders in place, those are the sort of employers who are going to look at this and go, okay, let's see what we can learn now. Let's keep pushing forward. And, you know, oh, okay, and there's neurodiversity. Let's push ahead with that because they recognize that people don't come to work and leave their lives behind.
Yeah,
It all comes to work with them. And if you don't recognize that, then you're going to have people who are taking time off, who are underperforming, who aren't going for the promotions that they could go for because they don't feel comfortable. So I think we have seen like certifications and people making commitments and you know, a lot of good initiatives. We're seeing some companies, and this is the most important thing, that they don't just go, okay, this is what we're going to give our staff. They create an environment where communication is top of the list and people feel okay, men and women feel okay to say, this is what I'm experiencing, and to be able to say, and this is what would help me.
yeah.
And
Do
it could
you feel that there has actually been a real change, a lived experience change for women in the workplace, rather than it just being sort of some whitewashing, sugarcoating of employers?
for some women in the workplace, I think it has been really good. But it's not everybody. Cultural change takes a long while. And between January, I've put the statistics on my screen, so excuse me, because I wanted to give you the right
Yes.
statistics. Between January and March this year, there were 204 claims to the Employment Tribunal citing menopause,
Wow. Does
compared
that
to
mean
just
unfair dismissal?
it could be anything like disciplinary actions.
Right.
It could be anything to do with their employment where they've gone, no, that's not fair. And that compares to 64 cases in 2022. So it's an increase of
Wow.
319%.
Wow.
Now, I think there are a lot of reasons for that. I mean, the fact that it cites menopause doesn't mean, that it was definitely a menopause issue, because if I was an employment lawyer, and
Yeah.
I was taking a case to court that involved a woman at midlife, I'm going to mention menopause because I don't know, it might have been.
Yeah.
So I'm not saying that all those cases will actually end up being menopause cases, but we talked about this very early on about disability
Yeah.
discrimination and the fact that in certain circumstances, menopause can be seen as a disability,
Yeah.
means that that plays a huge part in some of these cases. Now, again, we're not saying it is a disability. We're talking about in the context of law.
Yeah.
And in the
But again, it's
context,
it's a double-edged sword, because some employers are going to say, well, I don't want to touch this, so I'm not going to employ, or I'm going to sort of make it, unattractive for midlife menopausal women to be in my workplace because I don't even want to touch this topic. And then there are others who will benefit from the fact that they now have legal standing to be able to, take their employers to court. But it sort of feels that, do menopausal women want to be considered as a disability group?
I think that some women would prefer it if menopause was mentioned as a protected characteristic within the
Yes.
Act, because it isn't. And that way they could just say this is about menopause rather than this is about disability or it's about gender. They would rather say this is about menopause. But, we've seen this all through, since I started work, which was back in the dark ages, when there wasn't pay equality. I mean,
Yeah.
there isn't still pay equality, but, when the Equality Act, the pay equality came in, then people were really worried. Women were really worried they wouldn't be employed anymore.
Yeah.
Who's going to employ us if they've got to pay the same amount? Sounds like madness now. But
Yeah.
anyway, and then it was like, having maternity leave.
Yeah.
Who's going to employ us if we're going to have babies? Now, I know sometimes it comes up, but it was a huge leap forward, and a lot of employers have embraced it and said, "Well, we want women in our workplace. We want
Yeah.
these people, and they are more loyal if we treat them properly." So we have to kind of take some of that on board. That whenever you make this kind of step forward, there's always the fear that it's going to lead you being excluded.
Mm.
But there are more women over 50 in the workplace than ever.
Yeah.
It's one of the fastest growing demographics. Are you going to get rid of them all?
Yeah.
Are you going to get rid of all that knowledge and experience and training? I know, because the United States is so far behind us on all of this,
Yeah.
women are really worried, because I think also there is a lot more ageism.
Yeah.
And they're worried that they're like, even though getting older is a good thing, it's much better than dying.
Yeah.
Okay. But and every day we get a little bit older. But the acknowledgement of that seems to be really
Mhm.
difficult. I don't know
Well,
what the
even
problem
in the
is, but
US, even maternity leave or paternity leave is not an assumed
mm,
right in many workplace environments today,
mm,
still today.
yeah, yeah.
So I
So
know the US is a
yeah,
bit behind on this topic.
Yeah, but we have seen some really good initiatives of employers saying what would help you. You know,
Amazing.
employers who run yoga classes, employers who do provide quiet rooms,
Mm.
employers who have offered to pay for hormone therapy because we still have to pay for it.
Yeah.
You know, so and who kind of ask the men what would help them if they've got to accompany partners to medical appointments,
Yeah.
or perhaps they don't sleep very well because their partner's not sleeping very well. So it is a case of talking and communication, and from that coming up with reasonable adjustments that aren't just shelfware.
Yeah.
They're actually making a positive impact.
Yeah. Amazing. Um, we've spoken so much about so many different things, but as we come to sort of towards the end of our conversation, the women leading the charge in the menopause sort of field today, or in the menopause space today, are really, my generation, your generation, that Generation X, women born in the late 60s, early mid 70s, who really we are stepping up, and we are not scared to open up this Pandora's box. And as you know, my mission for this podcast also is about talking about all these things for the next generation. What do you see, on how do you see this women's health and menopause conversation changing for those millennials and sort of the next generations coming through, the Gen Zers and now the Gen Alphas who, are going to be in menopause in another 40 years. But really for those millennials and Gen Zers, what do you see is going to be different for them? How do you think their and sort of the characteristics of their cohort and the things that they've been through? What do you see sort of, looking in your crystal ball as sort of happening down the line?
I think it's really interesting because there will be more research, we will get more information, there will be more products, as more research goes into women and women's health. Um, so the millennials and the Gen Zs
Zers.
have grown up with tech. They're
Yeah.
used to using apps and searching for information. I mean, they now look at TikTok so much more. So they're going to be using tech so much more, either to monitor their health. They'll probably be monitoring their hormones. A lot of millennials will have used tech to help them with fertility. And so they're used to
Mm,
looking at cycles, and they're not
tracking.
afraid to be tracking their hormone levels.
Mm,
So I suspect there's going to be a lot more tech involved in it. They're going to look for answers in different places. So social media, looking on TikTok for videos about, well, what is this I'm experiencing? Um, I'm very hopeful because there are projects going on at the moment to take education about menopause more into schools. I
mm,
think there's like a basic level of understanding that younger children need to know that why we don't have babies until we die, the way cats and dogs do, just basic stuff. But there's a much bigger um, syllabus for the older children, the young adults, to really understand that fertility cycle,
yeah.
because I think a lot of them, are more in control of their fertility, but they don't realize that it declines. Nobody
Yeah.
told them that part of the story.
Yeah.
And I think they need to understand about menopause and when it can occur and what's happening in your body. So I'm very hopeful that there are in the background these programs being developed so that they become more informed. I think they're way more proactive.
Mm,
I think they want to be involved in their medical decisions. They haven't grown up going to see the doctor. I mean, if you get a doctor's appointment,
yeah.
you could sell it on eBay. I came in the other day and my husband said, I've got a doctor's appointment. I was like, wow, how amazing. You're actually going to go and see one.
Wow.
So I think they've grown up without that like contact with
Mhm.
doctors. and they're more used to kind of looking for their own information. And I think they're going to find that online a lot more. And I'm really hopeful that they will embrace this stage of life and that they will, find their own solutions and that there will be more solutions for them.
Yeah. I think it's really interesting what you've said about the menopause education because I know that it's happening in the UK. I don't actually think it's happening anywhere else in the world. From what from what I've seen and read and heard, it's definitely not happening in the US. It may be happening in Australia a little bit, but
Australia is more
yeah,
forward than America. Unfortunately, I think some of the things that have happened in the UK are playing out in Australia and are
yes,
playing out in the US.
yes,
And
yes,
you kind of hope they'll take the best things from it
yeah.
and leave the other stuff.
And I definitely don't think that there's menopause education in Europe, to the best of my
No.
knowledge. But the UK definitely is a pioneer in bringing that to schools in some form of education because it is still quite shocking that when it comes to women's health education for young girls, it is all about periods, reproduction, how not to get pregnant, and that's about it. And there
Mm.
is no larger picture of a woman's life, reproductive life
Yes.
cycle.
Yes.
So the fact that it starts with puberty and ends at postmenopause, that's not discussed. It starts at puberty and ends when you have your baby. That's the cycle. And
Yeah.
it's quite shocking. Even
Yeah.
in I mean, I did biology A level a long time ago. Um, even like that, there is no conversation in biology about what happens after, your cycle gets interrupted because you get pregnant. That's it. That's where it
Yeah.
ends. There is no conversation about what happens next, women's long-term health. It's sort of like once you've had a child, that's it. You know, we,
Done, dusted.
there's nothing to talk about. Forget about the fact that there may be women today who are by choice not having children, not by choice not having children. Like it's just, and I agree with you. I think that um, the next generation are much more open to all different. I mean, it's hysterical. I was even watching a show with my son, and my son is 12, watching some Netflix show, and a couple wanted to try for a baby, but they're a bit older, and my son turned around and said to me, "Well, why don't they just adopt?" And it was just like, okay, fine, they can't have a naturally, they'll just go and adopt. And it wasn't even like, and I think there are just some obvious conversations that the next generation are having that hopefully will serve them
Yeah.
well as they need to deal with all these different issues.
Yeah, I certainly hope so. I hope I hope women get more understanding of their bodies and from that learn to love them. I mean, there's an amazing book called Eve about the evolution of the human anatomy, the
Oh,
female
wow.
anatomy. And from reading it, I just really appreciated my body.
Yeah.
I thought, how amazing is it that it's evolved to do all of this?
Yes.
I mean, it's stunning. So I hope that by learning more about their bodies, they'll fall in love with them more and then accept, well, if I've put on a bit of weight there, it could be because my body is responding to this stage of my life. That's why it's doing it.
Yeah.
Instead of going, oh my God, how did this happen?
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, so you have given us so much time. You've talked about so many different things. I mean, you really are one of the menopause oracles that I really, go to. You are one of my go-to people. So I just love the fact that we've talked about so many things. But as we end this episode, this podcast is called Things I Want My Daughters to Know. And I ask all my guests, what is the message you want to leave your daughters, goddaughters, nieces, that next generation? We've sort of touched on it, but if there's sort of one message that you really want to impart to that next generation of daughters, sort of using that, daughters as a generic term.
Yeah, yeah, because I am in my grandmother stage of life now. I don't have
Ah,
grandchildren, but I am in that stage of life where I've been through all of this, and then you want to impart the wisdom.
yeah. We've
And
all got wisdom to give to the next generation.
and I even had this conversation with my son's girlfriend the other week. She was like, "Tell me a bit about menopause." And I was like, "Oh my goodness, I'm having this conversation."
Yeah,
But it's really what I've been saying. I would say to them, engage with this stage of life, embrace it. Don't think this is something to fear. This is your opportunity to reset your health,
yeah,
to review where you are and say, what choices do I want to make now? Get educated about it, make your own choices based on what you've read and, how you feel about things, your knowledge of your own body. You can make good choices because you know the body that you're inhabiting. You have to take responsibility for it and advocate for it.
yeah,
And that's what I would be passing on. Make your own choices, get educated, and then advocate for what you need and for what you want.
yeah. I think that's a super powerful message for us to end with. Pat, thank you so much for sharing your wisdom. It's always a joy talking to you. That I know we could talk for hours and hours. So thank you for giving us so much of your time. I really appreciate it. Where can people find you if they want to connect with you, if they want to learn more about what you do?
So if they go to patduckworth.com, you can see what I've got there. I've written 5 books about this now. I thought it was going to be one book, but
I know, I can't believe it.
I'm actually writing a novel now about
Wow.
4 women going through menopause. I mean, where does it end?
Wow.
Perhaps a Netflix
Yes.
series.
I look forward to it. I can't wait. Well, everyone, if you want to connect with Pat, please go check her out. I know she's on social media, she's got her website. Go check out her books. She is really a wealth of information, especially because she's been doing it for so long. If you want to send me your comments about today's episode, all the details to reach out to me are in the show notes. I look forward. Hope you've enjoyed this session. I look forward to hearing from you. And please join us at another episode of the Things I Want My Daughters to Know podcast.
Thank you so much. It's been a joy.